Hello. Thank you for tuning into the video. Today, I have 4 true scary stories from the internet. If you enjoy listening to scary stories, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I upload scary stories on a daily basis, and any support would be greatly appreciated. And now, let's begin. I never thought a simple grocery run could turn into the most terrifying experience of my life. My name doesn't matter, but I'm 25 years old, living in Tucson, Arizona. I moved here 2 years ago for a change of pace after growing up in a chaotic city environment. Tucson felt quieter, safer. I work as a receptionist at a small dental office, and my days are usually mundane, filled with phone calls, appointment scheduling, and the occasional chat with patients. My evenings, they're typically spent catching up on shows or reading a good book. Nothing extraordinary. That night, I had a simple plan. Grab a few groceries from the store down the street and head home to make dinner. It was around 8 p.m., not too late, but dark enough that the parking lot was sparsely filled. I parked close to the entrance, out of habit more than concern. The automatic doors slid open with a familiar whoosh, and I grabbed a basket, making my way through the aisles. As I wandered through the produce section, selecting apples and checking for ripeness, I felt a strange sensation. You know that prickling feeling on the back of your neck when someone's eyes are on you? I shrugged it off at first. Maybe someone just happened to glance my way. But as I moved through the store, that feeling lingered. In the bread aisle, I saw him. A man, maybe in his late 30s, wearing a faded gray hoodie and dark jeans. He wasn't particularly tall, maybe 5 feet 8 inches, with a scruffy beard and disheveled brown hair. What caught my attention was his gaze. It was unsettlingly focused. He wasn't pretending to browse or looking at his phone like most people do. He was watching me. I tried to ignore him, convincing myself that I was being paranoid. I mean, people glance at each other all the time in stores, right? But then I noticed that wherever I went, he wasn't far behind. In the dairy section, I saw him lingering by the yogurt, eyes still locked on me. In the cereal aisle, he stood at the end, peeking around the corner. I gripped my basket tighter, deciding to finish quickly and leave. As I turned toward the checkout lanes, he was suddenly there, standing right in front of me. My stomach dropped. "Hey," he said, a crooked smile spreading across his face. "Shopping alone?" His voice was smooth, but with a hint of something sinister underneath. I forced a polite smile, hoping to end the conversation quickly. "Yeah, just grabbing a few things," I replied, trying to step around him. But he moved with me, blocking my path. "Nice night for it," he continued. "You live around here?" Red flags exploded in my mind. I lied. "No, just passing through." He chuckled softly, leaning in slightly. "Funny, I think I've seen you here before." Panic bubbled up inside me, but I masked it with a nervous laugh. I needed to get away. "Excuse me, there you are." A woman's voice cut through the tension. I turned to see a blonde woman in her 30s approaching with a bright smile. She wore a casual denim jacket over a floral dress, pushing a cart filled with groceries. "I've been looking all over for you," she said, locking eyes with me. I was confused but grateful. She slipped her arm through mine and gently tugged me away from the man. "Sorry to interrupt," she said to him, "but we really need to go." He frowned, but didn't say anything as she led me down another aisle. "Thank you," I whispered once we were out of earshot. I didn't know what to do. She smiled kindly. "No problem. I saw the way he was looking at you. Creepy, right?" I nodded, feeling a bit more at ease. "Yeah, really creepy." "Let's just get you out of here," she said, her grip on my arm firm. As we walked, she chatted casually, asking me about my day, my plans for the evening. It felt odd how friendly she was, but I was too relieved to question it. However, as we turned a corner near the back of the store, I noticed we weren't heading towards the front exit. Confused, I glanced at her. "Where are we going?" She smiled, but something about it felt off. "Just a shortcut. Trust me." My gut twisted in warning. We exited through a side door into a dimly lit parking lot. And then I saw it. A dark blue van with its side door open. Standing beside it, with that same unsettling smile, was the man from the store. It hit me like a punch to the gut. They were working together. Panic surged through me. I had to act fast. With all the strength I could muster, I drove my elbow into the woman's stomach. She gasped, loosening her grip just enough for me to break free. I sprinted back towards the store, heart pounding so loudly it echoed in my ears. Behind me, I heard the van's engine roar to life, tires squealing as they sped off. Inside, I found an employee and breathlessly explained everything. The police were called immediately. When they checked the security footage, it clearly showed the van's license plate. But when they ran it through the system, it wasn't registered to anyone. The man and the woman were never caught. Even now, I can't shake the fear that they're still out there, watching, waiting for their next victim. I had never considered myself the kind of person who would get caught up in something strange. I lived in a quiet neighborhood in Buffalo, New York, with my husband Greg and our 2 young children. I worked as a school counselor, which meant I was always busy, always focused on other people's problems. My life, for the most part, was predictable, routine, reliable, like the seasons that changed every year. But all of that changed when I started receiving the letters. It was a Saturday afternoon when the first one came. I had just returned from grocery shopping, bags in hand, and as I opened the door, I saw it, a plain white envelope sitting on the doorstep. No return address, no name, just a neatly folded piece of paper inside. I almost didn't open it. Something about the anonymity of it felt off, but curiosity got the best of me. The note was short and simple, written in neat, precise handwriting. "I know what you did." I couldn't understand it. What did it mean? What had I done? I turned the note over, hoping for more information, but there was nothing else. Just that cryptic message. I showed it to Greg, but he dismissed it as a prank. Maybe some bored teenager or a neighbor messing with us. But even as he reassured me, I felt a knot in my stomach. The days went on, and I tried to forget about the note, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Then, a few days later, another letter arrived. Same white envelope, same handwriting, but this time, the message was different. "I've been watching you." I froze when I read those words. My heart started pounding, and my hands trembled as I held the paper. I looked around the room as if the walls might close in on me, but the letter didn't provide any further explanation. It didn't tell me who was watching or why. It was just a vague, unsettling message. I showed Greg the letter this time, and his reaction was more serious. He suggested we contact the police, but I hesitated. It didn't seem like enough to warrant their involvement. Just a weird coincidence, I told myself. But deep down, I knew I wasn't being paranoid. I felt a creeping unease that I couldn't shake. A few more days passed, and I convinced myself it was over. But then, late one night, I heard a noise outside. It was a soft sound, barely audible, but it made my skin crawl. It was like someone was standing just outside our window, breathing. I couldn't bring myself to check, afraid of what I might find. The next morning, there was another letter. "You should have stopped." This time, the words were written in a hasty scrawl, almost as if the writer was angry. I felt a chill run down my spine. The idea that someone was watching me, following me, was terrifying. It wasn't just the letters anymore. It was the feeling that I was no longer alone in my own house. I couldn't shake the sense that someone was lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. We installed cameras around the house, but they didn't catch anything unusual. No one was ever seen near the property, and yet I could still feel their presence. It was like being hunted, but by someone I couldn't see. The letters kept coming, now by mail, each one more direct, more threatening. We searched the return address on the internet and found that it didn't exist. "I know where you go. I've seen your children. You can't hide from me." Then, one evening, as I was driving home from work, I noticed something strange. A car that had been parked across the street from our house for the past few days was still there. I had seen it earlier that morning, but now it was dark and the car's headlights were off. No one was inside, but I could see the faint outline of something on the dashboard, something that reflected the light of the street lamp overhead. I don't know why, but I had to go over. I parked in front of the car, heart racing. I walked up to it and peered inside. A note. R. Esting on the passenger seat. My mind raced, but I knew in that moment that this was no coincidence. I ran into the house and slammed the door shut behind me, locking it immediately. I heard the strange car from across the street start up. I looked out the window, watching it slowly drive away. It was too far away to see the driver's face. I was overwhelmed with confusion and terror. There hadn't been anybody in the vehicle just a few moments ago. I called the police. They said they would look into it, but they didn't have much to go on. They advised me to file a report, but I knew there was no real way to catch someone like this. Whoever they were careful, smart, and I was nothing more than a target to them. The next letter arrived 2 days later. I'm closer than you think. It wasn't just words anymore. The threat was real. I could feel it. I started locking the doors and windows every night, even when I was home. I kept the blinds shut. I couldn't go outside without feeling eyes on me. But it wasn't enough. They always seemed to know, always seemed to be there. I stopped leaving the house altogether. I couldn't bring myself to go out in public, knowing they could be anywhere. The letters kept coming, taunting me. I tried to fight the fear, but it was no use. I was living in a prison of my own making. I couldn't escape. And somehow, I knew, deep down, that I never would. Days turned into weeks, and the fear became my constant companion. I stopped going out. I didn't go to work. I stayed in, terrified of even stepping foot outside the door. Greg tried to be understanding, but he didn't understand what I was going through. How could he? The letters, the shadow that loomed in the corner of my life. It was all too much. One night, I finally broke. I couldn't take it anymore. The feeling of being trapped, of never being alone, of always being watched, was suffocating. I grabbed my phone and called the police again, begging them to take action, to do something. But even their reassurances couldn't calm the storm inside me. It wasn't until the morning after that phone call that I realized how much danger I was in. The phone rang just before dawn, the harsh sound pulling me out of a fitful sleep. I answered, hoping it was the police with some news. It wasn't. The voice on the other end was low, almost a whisper, but unmistakable. "I've been waiting for you," they said. "I know exactly where you are." A surge of terror shot through me. I looked around the room, the familiar walls closing in on me. I was no longer just a victim of letters. I was a target, and this person was close. I ran to the window and looked out onto the street, but the only thing I saw was the street lamp casting long shadows across the pavement. My breath caught in my throat. The car, the same one that had been parked outside days ago, it was there. But this time, I saw someone sitting inside. I reached for my phone again, but before I could dial, the front doorbell rang. I froze. Whoever it was had found me. I couldn't stay here anymore. My heart racing, I grabbed the kids and Greg. We ran out of the back door. I didn't know where we were going or how we would get there, but we had to get away. We couldn't risk being in that house a minute longer. We stayed in a hotel that night, a rundown place far from home, just far enough that I felt the barest sense of safety. The police did a sweep of the house, but they found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. It was as if whoever had been watching me had just disappeared. But I knew they hadn't. They were still out there. I don't know what the future holds or how I will ever feel safe again, but what I do know is that there is someone who knows me, someone who has been watching me for far too long. And they're still out there, waiting for the right moment to make themselves known again. And I know deep down they won't stop, not until they get what they want. I moved to Charleston, South Carolina, when I was 34. It wasn't some grand adventure or dream relocation, more like a necessary escape. I had just left behind a draining corporate job in Atlanta and wanted a fresh start. My job as a freelance writer allowed me to work from anywhere. and Charleston seemed like the perfect place, with its charming streets, rich history, and proximity to the ocean. I found a small but comfortable apartment in an old building right in the heart of the historic district. The place had character, exposed brick walls, creaky wooden floors, and windows that overlooked the quiet, cobbled streets below. It wasn't much, but it felt like home. Most days I found solace in the routine. Mornings were spent at a local coffee shop, tapping away at my laptop, and afternoons were often spent wandering the city or sitting by the waterfront, letting the breeze clear my head. Life felt peaceful for the first time in a long while. It was during one of my afternoon strolls through Waterfront Park that I met him. He was sitting on a bench, sketching something in a worn leather notebook. His clothes were plain, his demeanor unassuming. I only noticed him because he dropped his pencil as I walked by, and instinctively I bent down to pick it up. "Thanks," he said, offering a warm smile. "I'm David." "No problem," I replied, returning the smile. "I'm Alex." We chatted for a few minutes, just small talk about the weather and how beautiful Charleston was this time of year. He mentioned that he was an artist, newly settled in the city, trying to find inspiration. It was a pleasant conversation, and I left thinking nothing of it. Over the next few days, I ran into David more often. Once at the coffee shop I frequented, another time at the bookstore down the street from my apartment. Each time, he was friendly, polite, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. "It's funny how we keep running into each other," he chuckled one afternoon as we sat down for coffee together. "Maybe it's fate." I laughed it off, enjoying the company. David had a way of making you feel like you were the most interesting person in the room. His stories about traveling through Europe to find inspiration for his art were captivating, and I found myself looking forward to our chance encounters. But then, the encounters started to feel less like coincidences. One night, as I was walking home from a late-night writing session at the coffee shop, I noticed someone following me. My heart pounded as I picked up my pace, but when I turned around, it was just David. "Oh, hey, Alex," he said, a little out of breath. "I didn't mean to startle you. I was just heading home." I laughed nervously, brushing off the unease. "No worries. We really do keep running into each other." But as the days passed, David started showing up in places I never mentioned to him. The gym I just joined, the quiet library where I often worked when I needed a change of scenery, even the grocery store at odd hours. He always had an excuse, a reason for being there, but something felt off. Then the gifts started. I realized he somehow had my phone number, though I never gave it to him. Perhaps he overheard me giving it to the barista at the coffee shop, or found it through social media links connected to my freelance work. However he got it, the thought unsettled me deeply. At first, it was small things. A sketch he claimed reminded him of me, a book he thought I'd like, a coffee waiting for me when I arrived at my usual spot. But then, more personal items appeared at my doorstep. A scarf I had admired in a shop window, my favorite brand of wine, and even a photograph of me sitting by the waterfront. I never told him where I lived. Panic settled in my chest, and I started avoiding him. I changed my routine, stopped going to my favorite places, and even contemplated moving, but David always found a way to reach me. My phone would buzz at odd hours with messages like, "Thinking of you," or "You can't avoid me forever." One evening, there was a knock at my door. My breath hitched as I peeked through the peephole. It was David. "Alex, I know you're in there," he called softly. "I just want to talk." I stayed silent, heart racing. After a few minutes, I heard him sigh and leave. But when I finally gathered the courage to open the door, I found a note taped to it. "You can't hide from me." That night, I packed a bag, ready to leave Charleston behind. But as I stepped outside, David was there, waiting. "Going somewhere?" he asked, his smile gone, replaced by a cold, unsettling stare. I turned to run, but he grabbed my arm, pulling me back. I screamed, struggling against his grip. In the chaos, I managed to kick him hard enough to break free and sprinted down the street, not stopping until I reached the police station just a few blocks away. The authorities found David in his apartment, surrounded by sketches of me, journal entries detailing every interaction we had, and plans for what he called our future together. He was arrested and sentenced to prison for stalking and attempted kidnapping. I moved away from Charleston, but the memory of David's gaze, his calculated persistence, still haunts me. Every time I walk down a quiet street or see someone sketching in a notebook, I feel a chill run down my spine, reminding me that not all monsters wear masks. I never thought something like this could happen to me. It all started a few months ago on a quiet afternoon that was nothing out of the ordinary. My name is John. I'm 35 years old, living in a mid-sized house on the outskirts of Indianapolis. I've been here for over a decade now, working as a mechanic in a local garage. I've got a few good friends, a steady job, and I was content with my life. I didn't ask for anything more. My house is in a part of town that's been slowly getting worse over the years. The area has always been a bit rough, but it wasn't until recently that things started taking a darker turn. I'd heard whispers about break-ins and strange people wandering around, but it never bothered me until it did. It was one of those long, drizzly afternoons, the kind where everything feels heavier, like the sky is pressing down on you. I had just finished working on an old Chevy that had come into the garage and was looking forward to a quiet evening. It wasn't unusual for me to work late, but today, something felt different. I locked up the garage and drove back to my house just as the rain started coming down harder. By the time I turned onto my street, the streetlights flickered, their dull yellow light casting strange shadows across the wet pavement. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something was off. There was a car parked across the street, not in a driveway, but just on the curb, its engine running. I didn't think much of it at first, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I parked, grabbed my things, and went inside, shaking off the unease. I should have trusted my instincts. Over the next few days, I noticed more odd things. The same car was parked across the street more than once, sometimes in the middle of the night, and the figure sitting in it looked like they were watching my house. At first, I told myself it was just someone waiting for someone else, maybe a neighbor, or someone with bad parking habits. But the more I saw that car, the more I began to feel paranoid. I started to notice small signs of someone being around my house when I wasn't there. Scratches on the windowsill, footprints in the mud near the back door, things slightly out of place inside. It could have been anything, but it felt intentional, like someone had been snooping around, getting closer every time. One evening, I decided I'd had enough. I pulled the blinds, checked the locks, and tried to relax, but I couldn't. I kept glancing at the window, expecting to see the shape of someone lurking just beyond the glass. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, so I grabbed my phone and called my best friend, Kevin. He's a tough guy, worked in construction most of his life, and if anyone could give me some peace of mind, it was him. "Kev, something's off," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Off how?" he asked, his voice calm but curious. "I don't know. I think someone's been creeping around my house." He paused for a second, then said, "You want me to come over?" I didn't even hesitate. "Yeah, I'd feel better if you did." Within an hour, Kevin showed up, his truck pulling into my driveway. We sat in my living room, me trying to shake the feeling of being watched, Kevin flipping through a magazine, his presence a comfort, even though I knew I was overreacting. Then we heard it, a soft knock on the door. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. It wasn't a normal knock. It was slow, deliberate, almost rhythmic. Kevin got up and peeked through the peephole. "Who is it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer at first, just stood there, staring. I felt my stomach drop. He opened the door slightly, just enough to speak to whoever was out there. I couldn't see them from where I stood, but I could hear their voice clearly. "I'm looking for someone," the voice said, soft but firm. Kevin's expression changed, his face darkening. "I don't think you are." I stepped forward, trying to get a better look, but before I could, Kevin slammed the door shut. "Who was that?" I asked, my pulse racing. "I don't know, but they were weird," Kevin said, his voice low. I didn't feel safe anymore. The feeling of someone watching me had escalated to the point where I couldn't ignore it any longer. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and fear. The car across the street was always there, even when I went to the store, even when I went to work. The figure inside was still there, always lurking, always watching. In the following days, the knocking continued. It was always at odd hours, late at night, early in the morning. Always 3 slow knocks, spaced out just long enough for my heart to drop into my stomach. Every time I checked, no one was there, but the feeling of someone being close, standing just outside my door, wouldn't leave. I couldn't take it anymore. I went to the police, told them everything, but they didn't seem to take it seriously. They said they'd send someone to patrol the area, but nothing changed. They couldn't help, not really. The situation was escalating, and they couldn't give me answers. Then, one night, I decided to confront it. I waited until the usual time, when the car would be parked across the street, waiting for me to return. I stood at my window watching it, my breath shallow. I needed to know who was in that car. I had to see them face to face. When the car finally stopped in front of my house, I grabbed a flashlight and went outside, heart racing. The rain had started up again, and the air was thick with the smell of wet pavement. As I approached the car, I saw the figure in the driver's seat. They were just sitting there, looking straight ahead, unmoving. I stepped closer, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. The eyes behind the window were wide, hollow, and dead. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I didn't wait around to see what happened next. I turned and ran, slamming the door behind me as I bolted inside. My heart was hammering in my chest. I didn't know who that person was, but I knew they weren't just stalking me. They were waiting for me. The police came the next day after I called them, but they didn't find anything. The car was gone. The figure was gone. The house was quiet, but it wasn't over. I could still feel that presence, that unseen weight pressing down on me. I could still hear the knocks, faint but distinct. Days passed, and the car never returned. The strange figure never showed up again. But the unease, the sense that someone was watching me, lingered in the air, heavy and suffocating. It was as if the world had shifted, and I was no longer in control of what happened next. I don't know who that person was or what they wanted, but I don't think I'll ever feel safe in my own home again. They never came back, but sometimes, in the middle of the night, I hear the soft knock at my door. Always 3 knocks. Always slow.